we are Whatever Is Left, here with another episode for you guys tonight. And this time on the topic of Israel and Palestine. I'm Dani.
And I'm Hunter. So there is a lot to unpack here. Let's start with a really simple and drawn out history lesson. I say that because I wrote this and it ended up being way longer than I wanted it to be, but I didn't want to leave out any details.
It's as long as it needs to be.
It's as long as it needs to be. Thank you for that. That makes me feel a little bit better actually. So, the region of Palestine has been the cradle of religion throughout history. Not every religion has popped up here, but some of the biggest ones have. So, Judaism evolved from the local polytheistic religions and became a prominent faith in the region. This is, back in the Iron Age, basically. It was represented by the kingdoms of Israel and Judah in ancient history, until they were conquered by the Neo-Assyrians and Neo-Babylonians.
The region traded hands then to the Persians, then to Alexander the Great, and
the Seleucids.
The region gained brief autonomy where it once again was conquered by the Romans. Romans doing what Romans do. During Roman rule, Christianity was founded in the region. It remained part of the Eastern Roman Empire, which was quickly becoming Christianized, until the region was conquered by the Arabs, who practiced another new religion, Islam.
So the Arabs, through 4 different caliphates, ruled the region for a few centuries until conquest by the Muslim Seljuk Empire, and immediately after by the Christian Crusader states, who founded the Christian Kingdom of Jerusalem. This changed after conquest by the Ayyubid Sultanate and the Mamluk Sultanate, and then by the Ottoman Empire. After World War I, the Ottomans were carved up by the British and the French, and the British Mandate of Palestine was born.
The British were strongly influenced by the Zionist movement. Zionism is a movement to establish a state for the Jewish people. It grew in popularity in World War II as a result of the Holocaust. And in 1948, the modern state of Israel was born. Note that by this point, there was already a significant Jewish settlement in the region, and the Nakba, Nakba, during the 1948 Arab-Israeli War, which did displace many thousands of Palestinians to make room for Israeli soldiers. Settlers. Over the next decades, Palestinians who were promised a state of their own within Palestine have become occupied in their lands, have had their borders disrespected, and their human rights stripped.
So, Israel, a nation born out of conflict, in a region which has been the nexus of empires for millennia, and considered holy land for over 3.8 billion people, is today part of yet more conflict. Surprise.
Who would have thunk? But let's talk a little bit more on modern history. Hamas, a militant and political organization headquartered in Gaza, took power there in an election back in 2006. Riding the waves of militant insurgency against Israeli occupation. They have held power there, but have not held elections.
A little bit of extra background information on Gaza, in case someone's really not versed in the topic. There's only 2 parts of the region that is in control by Palestine, and that is the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. So when we're talking about Gaza and the Gaza Strip, this is one of the 2 parts of the nation of Palestine. And they have 2 different governments, too. They're not one unified Palestine government. They have 2 different governments that run each part. So we're specifically talking about Hamas right now and Gaza, which is where most of this conflict has been so far.
But it has actually started creeping into the West Bank.
Yes, they have their own problems that we could talk about too. But Yeah. So on October 7th, this all sparked up and got more significant international attention. As a Hamas terrorist attack killed 1,300 people at a music festival in Israel that caused a mobilization of the Israeli military and sparked a war between Israel and Hamas. This conflict, as of last week, Monday the 22nd, had resulted in the deaths of over 25,000 people, with 70% being women and children, according to the Gaza Health Ministry. Now, keep in mind that number is higher today, and it was probably already a lowball. It's a lot.
Yeah, I think I needed a moment to like really.
That is so many people. This is a truly horrific and violent war that's happening over there. It's absolutely brutal. And you're going to talk a little bit more about that in a second.
So, okay, according to Reuters, 1.7 million Gazians, about 75% of the population, have been displaced. And at this point, there is only 15 functional hospitals who are running over capacity. As a reminder, targeting hospitals is against international law. Speaking about international laws, though, South Africa, the former apartheid state, took Israel to international court on accusations of violating the 1948 UN Genocide Convention, which was originally drafted in part due to the mass killings of Jewish people in the Holocaust during the Second World War. While the South African demand of ceasefire was not met, many saw the small victory of the World Court saying, take all measures to prevent a genocide of Palestinians. Realistically, at the end of the day, Israel wanted the court case thrown out. South Africa wanted a ceasefire. No one got what they wanted, but this is a small victory.
Too small of a victory, if I were to give my opinion on it.
I mean, that's what this is for.
But yes, even if the International Criminal Court came out and said Israel's doing a genocide, I wonder what the next step would have been. Because they basically said, hey guys, you're kind of doing a genocide, but we're not going to say that, so you guys should do all you can to prevent a genocide. But yeah, I don't think they're doing a whole lot to prevent a genocide. I think they're going for total extermination here, at least in Gaza.
They are. They're going for a total extermination, and they are bombing places that they told citizens they would be safe at. At this point, they're just gathering people to bomb them.
That's certainly what it feels like, not to mention that, like, so much of the population has been displaced. We talked about that. Much of the city of Gaza is just leveled, like, just bombed into nothingness. There's just rubble everywhere, and that's perfect for the Israelis who want to turn it into, like, a bunch of fancy beachside, resorts.
And the thing, I think we keep seeing these pictures, I think, kind of pop back up to piggyback on that. Seeing these pictures, seeing the images that we have coming out of Gaza and post bombings, we need to remember Gaza and Palestine before all this happened, because it was a beautiful country and it's purposely being erased by the Israelis. It's important to hold on to those positive images and those histories and the culture that it is, because Palestinians will not be erased if we continue to make sure to hold on to things.
Very good points. Yeah, it's just, I don't imagine that if there was an accusation, a charge of genocide by the International Criminal Court against the nation of Israel, I don't think there'd be some widespread international coalition to go in there and like remove Netanyahu and his government from power or anything like that. I don't see the world rallying to, stop this atrocity. I don't.
I feel like
I
it's
would wish
started.
that would happen.
But I guess the people have started rallying behind it because I think truly, no matter what happens at the end of the day, Israel and the court of public opinion, Israel and the people's minds has lost. When even in America, 80%, which it's so hard to get Americans to agree on something, for most Americans to agree on a ceasefire, that this is a genocide, I think the governments might not listen, but the people have. The people have watched children give reports on what's going on. The people have seen reporters die, more reporters dying in the last few months than all of, I think, World War II. I think it was.
It's been a lot of death. They've definitely been targeting the media significantly. They don't want the story about what's happening to be told.
It's why sending SIM cards works, because when people like Basan, who are constantly sharing the news, she's still a kid. Like, I think she's like 20, and people are using her as a news reporter. No, she's a child who's watching her country die.
Very impactful. Um, yeah, the whole situation is really rough. It's goes far and beyond um, what should be reasonable as any kind of retaliation against Hamas. This is the state of Israel taking terrorism performed by Hamas and taking that revenge out on all of the Palestinians in Gaza. And it's extreme and it's heartbreaking. And I definitely think that the International Criminal Court did not go far enough in their decision.
They 68 reporters in 10 weeks. It is the deadliest. It's the most dangerous war for journalists ever.
Yeah, certainly. And Israel also is treating every able-bodied Palestinian adult male as a member of Hamas. So every single man is being treated like they're a military target. There's only like 30,000 members of Hamas out of like 2 million Gazans. And every adult male is being treated like they're Hamas, even if they're not. But even then, as all military age men are being treated like they're Hamas, there's still 70% of the deaths being women and children. Explain that to me.
Well, I can actually, in this very specific case of Israel using what is classified as dumb bombs. In most cases, and we've seen Israel have the ability to do this and have the technology where if they wanted to target a small room, they could easily do it. We've seen pictures, we've seen it go into effect, but rather than do that, they are using extreme force and wiping out city blocks with one bomb that isn't controlled. That it's just like, here's a target, and then boom, that's all that it is.
So when we're thinking about solutions to all this, one of the common ones that's been talked about for decades and decades now is a two-state solution. So a two-state solution is when in the region of Palestine, it's ideally peacefully divided between the nations of Israel and Palestine. So would you like to explain Danny, to our audience, why that is difficult to do at this particular moment.
I think it's. I think an analogy works best in this case. It's like someone coming into your house and just immediately demanding half of it. You might have invited them in, but now they're like asking. Well, they're first demanding for all of it, but they'll compromise for half of it.
They're not even compromising for half of it. They took a lot more than half of the country. The 1948 borders of Israel and Palestine certainly are not the borders today of those two nations.
No, and it's realistically like these are people who like there are plenty of people who are still alive who have seen their family homes like getting kicked out of their family homes and being told sorry. I think this is like I'm getting more emotional than I thought I would be about this topic. But I guess when it's a humanitarian crisis, it's better to be emotional than not care at all.
But yeah, there's a lot there, and we talked a bit earlier in the very beginning. We gave you guys a history lesson about like what kinds of people have been living in the region and for how long. Um, and yeah, there's a lot of ideas about who has a right to this land. Um,
And
and we're not here to make a strong case about that necessarily.
I think part of it is as well as like who this land belongs to and people having opinions on that differ on why they have those opinions.
Absolutely. You could have religious reasons for that. You could have like geopolitical, social reasons for that. Um, yeah, there's a lot that goes into that question. But President Biden thinks that a two-state solution is still possible, and he's hopeful for it. At least he says that to the public and the media.
Oh, Genocide Joe believes that a two-state solution is possible. Who would have thunk it?
But he believes this despite Israeli President Benjamin Netanyahu not believing that a two-state solution is possible, which leads us to question why President Biden and the U.S. State Department isn't pressuring to have a new government in Israel for them to put someone in charge who's willing to negotiate with the Palestinians instead of us being complicit in a genocide. These are important questions that we need to ask.
If
Why?
only if only we can get our government officials to talk to us and answer these questions. Because oftentimes when things like these are brought up, you are escorted out because you are causing a disturbance.
Yeah, I don't know if a two-state solution is still possible. It seems like Israel is holding all of the cards, and if they're holding all the cards, then the there's no motivation for them to try to have a two-state solution other than to just sort of appease other countries. But if they were trying to appease other countries, they wouldn't be doing a genocide right now.
No. Uh, and I think a two-state solution will still end up being where we are right now. Maybe not in genocide, but we'll still have Israelis controlling how much water people can use.
It's an occupation.
It is an occupation, and it's the fact that people get in trouble for building homes because they can't get because they need a permit, but they can't get a permit because the Israeli government wants to leave people displaced, and the best way to control people is to make them criminals. Learning from the best, America. If you can't control them, put them in prison and strip of their rights.
That's a little too real. But I guess we're good for that, keeping it real.
I'm just saying, like, you don't want people to have their voice heard, strip their voting rights, and the best way to do that is make them a felon.
I think the best case at this point would for there to be a one state solution, but it has to be a state where the Palestinians are treated like human beings and that there's a government um, where everyone is treated properly, has their human rights not being violated, and ensures that Palestinians have a seat at the table and that their voices are being listened to and heard.
And okay, so I might just be a bit pessimistic. I acknowledge that, and I'm definitely using American history as my guiding force here, because it just feels very accurate to compare these two. My fear is we're the what happened with the United States government and Native Americans is what's going to happen with Palestinians and Israel.
It certainly is a possibility, but I mean, ideally, this is, like I said, this is all ideally. I don't even imagine that this one state solution is likely.
Yeah, that's true. Like even
I also gave highlights of people's human rights being maintained, which was not there in your example of U.S. history. But yeah, there's certainly lessons to be learned from nations with settler colonialism, and ways that we can do things better in the future.
I guess that quote of "those who do not know history are
doomed to repeat it." Yeah,
is very accurate, and it's scary that in 2024 I can really point to way too many examples of human rights violations and the results of them.
I mean, human rights violations have been non-stop. They've always been around, that constant throughout the world. So that's nothing new, but we're getting a little bit of extra media attention to it because this is particularly egregious.
I think I'm I am I'm trying to figure out how to word this so it doesn't sound as bad as I feel like it's going to come out. I think when this happened was best for the Palestinians because now the whole world has their eyes on this and can truly give an opinion rather than being rather than the government being able to deny and dissuade and use propaganda against its people. And
that's a hot take.
Because historically it's happened, though. When things are going on in other countries, the U.S. government has very easily been able to use propaganda and ignorance and lack of information, like, to control its citizens. But when you have the whole world's eyes on you and you have you have the internet,
when history has its eyes on you.
I was avoiding trying to make that quote. But I think what the U.S. government is doing is what it's always done in trying to push narratives and propaganda and ideals. And it's failing because they can't control all the media. They can't control what comes in and out of Israel and Gaza because people are watching regular people talk about what's going on. It's not like these are like most of the coverage and information we're getting from now are from normal people.
There is significantly greater access to what's actually going on. And I think that's really driving all of his coverage forward.
Yeah. And that's why I was like, when I was saying, I was like, I know it's going to sound bad, but I'm glad that it happened.
Oh, now. Certainly. That was started with the spiciest hot take I've ever heard.
It's not, it wasn't meant to, like,
be misconstrued like that.
But
it's not a good thing that this is happening to the people of Gaza. It's a good thing that people are noticing and talking about it.
People are able to realize what's happening, and I'm grateful for technology all the time because of it.
I'm grateful for brave people standing up and getting the word out there.
And, you know, we have to keep listening to those voices. It might feel like there's some fatigue, and I might feel like you're constantly seeing it, but like we're getting snippets of it. We're getting like 2 minutes of our lives, not 24/7.
Absolutely. And there's a chance, an unfortunately high chance, of the fatigue growing so high that we start to think about what's happening in Israel and Palestine the same way that we've been thinking about the war that's been going on in Ukraine, where we're just been going on for too long and people stop caring, or another conflict starts up that draws everyone's attention away.
I think that's kind of started with another conflict drawing. It's
Possibly. We are certainly going to talk more about this war between Israel and Hamas and all the things that are going on in the Middle East every single day. So please keep an eye out for future content that we talk about.
I don't think Israel will stop though at at Gaza or the West Bank. I do think it's gonna continue growing or attempt to grow out.
What do you mean?
I don't know. I think that might be too much of a hot take.
That you think Israel has its eyes on their neighbors, like Israel, like not Israel,
Like Israel.
like Egypt, Lebanon,
Yes.
Jordan.
100%.
Interesting, because they've beaten all those countries in a war in the past, and they took huge amounts of land from Egypt. They took the whole Sinai Peninsula, and they took the Golan Heights. They had more territory than they currently possess, and they gave it back.
And I think they want it back.
Interesting. That is very much a hot take.
Like I said, I understand that I might not be like.
Why?
Again, it just might be me being pessimistic, but historically speaking, when do conquerors stop at one place?
I am hard pressed to call them conquerors in the traditional sense. They're still an objectively small country.
Every large empire starts with a small country.
I think calling them a conqueror is a little too early.
I'm thinking big picture, 10 years.
Yeah, I don't imagine that Israel has designs on the greater Levant and the Middle East at large, other than just
Again, it might just be me being pessimistic and
perhaps. Time will tell. Certainly 10 years down the line, if something crazy like that happens,
I want to be wrong.
You will get to say you were right. You can pull this clip.
I don't want to be right. I want to be wrong. I really do. I want Palestinians to keep their home. I want
Dani, back in 2024, predicted the rise of the Israeli empire.
I don't want that to be a thing. I don't. I want that to be like very like. I don't know how to.
All right, that is certainly a hot take.
It is a fear, and I think it's a justifiable fear, and I think their neighbors have that fear as well.
I think that they would be largely content to have full and total undeniable control over all of Palestine, the region, and of course the nation. I imagine that they want to have the nation of Palestine abolished, and to have their one-state solution. But with Israel being the state, and the Israeli people being the represented demographic group. I imagine that that's almost certainly their goal, and that they're probably not going to stop at anything until they get there. Which brings us back to, why is no one doing anything about this? Why is it that the only country that seems to be doing anything are the Houthis in Yemen, standing up for the Palestinians by disrupting international trade?
And like South Africa tried.
Yeah, I mean, they did something also, and I believe that there were a couple of other countries. I remember Mexico possibly being one of them, that were going to bring Israel to the International Criminal Court for other cases.
I guess we could talk about the small things that we can do as normal people.
Like what?
Well, BDS has a whole list, a quadrant, if you will, that I will put up somewhere, of companies hyper specific on boycotting and how they think you should boycott, whether it's pressure or, not buying from them. And they're like, it's 4 different options on how to do it. There is also, many people are calling for general boycotts too. So like, if you can, reducing how much you're buying, like spending, like if you have to go to work, no one's gonna, like, we live in a capitalistic hellscape. You have to survive, but maybe quiet quitting is an option, and things like that. And maybe do some research. There's probably a protest in your area. Write, call, annoy your elected officials. They work for us. Side note.
Yeah, and there's been a growing movement of people writing in ceasefire on their ballots.
That's
I
beautiful.
don't know if I recommend doing that.
I guess in a state like ours where it's gonna lean one way heavily.
It makes a statement.
Yeah.
Certainly. But so would possibly putting someone else in office. So that's my 2 cents on that topic.
We don't want Genocide Joe. We don't want Donald Trump either. I don't have a cool name for him yet.
He doesn't get a cool name.
Valid.
But yeah, so
this was very a solemn episode.
There's not a lot of happy stuff to say about this.
No.
There's a genocide going on. So
yeah.
This issue is important, and I hope that this episode was helpful and constructive in helping you guys understand this topic thoroughly.
And a reminder that it didn't start on October 7th.
No.
It's been going on for
thousands of years. No, but kind of. This conflict has been going on for at least a century now. Slowly building up over time. And there are paths forward where things get better. I just desperately hope that they can become reality. Dani and I stand with Palestine.
Free Palestine.
And I don't think I have anything else to add.
No.
I'm Hunter.
And I'm Dani.
And we're whatever is left, and we hope that you guys have an awesome night.